All right, thank you for staying. If you're just joining, you're watching Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital in Abuja. Time for us to take a look at the dailies on Daybreak. And now we'll begin with the Daily Trust newspaper. The lead story on the Daily Trust newspaper this morning says, "No more negotiation with FG," says ASU. The writer says, declares indefinite strike, lecturers resigning in droves and UNILAG. They are heartless NANS, that's National Association of Nigerian Students. And then you have their decisions not binding on state universities, pro-chancellors say. And that's on page 5. All the details are there on page 5. Then below the pictorial, you see FG may borrow 11 trillion naira for 2023 budget as deficit rises above 100%. At the very bottom, hush puppy, court bars FG from extraditing Kyari to US. 2023, politicians see election as war, says INEC. Woman lures kids with biscuits, steals 2-year-old in Niger. Below the masthead, quite interesting stories. Crowd defies downpour as Atiku, Ayu, others receive Shekarau on page 26. Banditry. FG releases 6.25 billion naira for cattle ranches in Katsina on page 27. Traders count losses as flood sacks Kano's Kantinkwari market on page 3. These are the top stories on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper.
And let's take a look at the Leadership newspaper. The Leadership newspaper has a lead that says it's still on the ASU strike. After 199 days of industrial action, ASU loses ground as more state varsities pull out of strike. Pro-chancellors want union democratized as lecturers extend strike indefinitely. Say unions' quest for funding varsities outdated. Slam Osodeke for calling state varsities quacks. We've met over 80% of lecturers' demands, federal government. They have lost Nigerian sympathy. Also, on right above that, we have a story that says, Shekarau hobnobs with APC, NNPP, PDP in 3 months. Beneath that, court restrains PMB, NBC from shutting down 53 broadcast stations. We also have a story here, business story, Dangote to save Forex through 40% sugar import substitution. Also on the Leadership, Ohaneze to pick consensus presidential candidate from Southeast. And right just below the masthead, we have the story here. Federal government piles more debts on next president with 11 trillion borrowing for 2023. Also, groom, 6 wedding guests die. Bride, 8 others hospitalized in Enugu. We also have the story here. Court rejects federal government's request to extradite Kyari to the United States. These are the major stories on the Leadership newspaper.
All right, so let's join our guest reviewer before we look at other papers. We have joining us virtually Hajia Zainab Okinu. She's the board chair, Blueprint Newspapers. She joins us to give perspectives to some of the stories on the front pages. Good morning, Hajia.
Good morning.
Yes, good to have you join
Thanks
us
for having me
on Daybreak. Yes, thank you. All right, well, you heard it. One thing that is very, it's everywhere on our papers this morning, or one story rather, that is everywhere, is the issue of ASU. Yesterday we saw that they have decided that the strike is now going to be indefinite. I mean, this is coming after several meetings with the federal government, and now they are saying no more meetings with federal government. It appears that they are fed up with whatever discussions they are having. Perhaps there's a missing trust somewhere. What's your take?
Okay. Good morning again. Let me take it from your last statement. It appears that ASU is fed up. If ASU is fed up, the federal government too is fed up, and parents are even fed up. So there's an extent you can fight a cause. It gets to a stage where everything will rebound on you. I think ASU has got to that stage. They have lost the sympathy of Nigerians. They have even lost the sympathy of the students they claim to be protecting. I, for one, have always wanted ASU's demands granted, because at least they veil whatever their personal interest is, they veil it with the fact that they want education resuscitated. We want our students, our universities to be able to compete with other universities in the world. Universities are not properly funded. We know all this, and whenever ASU comes up with with these demands, they always have, excuse me, they always have the sympathy of Nigerians. So, but more than 6 months down the line, and we are still recalcitrant. They should be able to come to a negotiating table. I know they've done that several times, and they have not been able to succeed. I also don't like the fact that the minister seems to be talking tough. If we all want the best for our children, if we want the best for our educational system, we should all sheath our sword and come to the negotiating table. Again, there's something like indefinite. I mean, talking about indefinite strike again is wrong for us to say that. Already they seem to be losing the ground.
But
because I mean, they seem to be losing ground because some universities are pulling out. So at the end of the day, I hope they will not have to beg to come back to the universities that they are now trying to shut down.
All right,
you wanted to say something?
All right. You say negotiations have been ongoing between the federal government and ASU and the lecturers. So some persons are saying maybe it's time for a third party to step in. Maybe it's time for the National Assembly members, or maybe even the Council of State, because at this point it appears as if the federal government and ASU, both of them cannot do it alone. What do you think?
I think I agree with that. The National Assembly as our representative should come in, and the Council of State as our elders and former presidents or heads of state and some other like minds should come in, because if it is beyond ASU and the Federal Ministry of Education, it shouldn't be beyond this. And we really need to take education seriously. I do not know where else in the world where schools are shut for more than 6 months, although it has happened somewhere close by, I think in Ghana or so. That still shows that we Africans are not yet ready to education. And that's why we continue to export our best, while our students, for those who can afford it, we continue to go abroad for their own education. And then what that means is capital flight. Anyway.
Okay, so you know, ASU have said time and again that this strike is not really about them. It's about the tertiary educational system in Nigeria. So don't you think that Nigerians are channeling their frustration at the wrong place? Don't you think that Nigerians should perhaps be joining ASU in solidarity, looking at the fact that it is about saving the tertiary educational system in Nigeria?
I made a reference to that earlier on, and I said ASU has always veiled their own personal interest by saying we're trying to save tertiary education in Nigeria. No problem about that, because we all know that our tertiary institutions are not how or what they should be. So I totally agree with them on that basis. But remember that what they are fighting for now is this no work, no pay thing, because for more than 6 months they didn't work and they want to be paid, and the federal government is saying no. That's their main problem now. I think basically the federal government has met some of their demands. So, well, but that shouldn't be a problem if we all adhere to our labor.
Yes, Hajia, there's the issue of the no work, no pay. But the union is still insisting that none of the agreement has been met. In fact, at this point, nobody even knows who is telling Nigerians the truth. Because the Ministry of Education, through the minister, says 80% of their demands have been met. ASU says nothing has been done.
That shouldn't be a problem if we are all open to each other, if there's transparency in the process. But the federal government should tell us what they have met among ASU's demands. And ASU members or ASU executive too should let us know what the federal government has said or has some of their demands, if they have been met. I don't think that should be a problem. I mean, if we really know what we are doing. The federal government cannot tell me that they do not have the wherewithal to make public what they have offered ASU. If they too are committed to this negotiation, if they are committed to the Nigerian students returning to schools, everybody is tired of the whole process.
Exactly.
Every one of us is affected one way or the other.
Exactly.
I also have my
children,
point. My nieces, my nephews,
you know,
in some of these universities are at home now, and I'm already seeing frustrations.
You know, Haja,
it's so bad, and it can lead to depression.
You know, that's exactly the point. You know, as you talk about what the federal government has offered, that they should make it public. And we have had, I mean, interviews with members of ASU here, and they have said that there is nothing on the table. There is no offer. You know, even when we read in the media stories that there's been 100 billion naira that has been set aside for tertiary institutions and another 50 billion naira and the likes. They will tell you that, well, they only saw that in the press, and that there was no such offer put to them. They have accused the federal government several times of lying to members of the public and the rest of them. So it appears that there is no trust. Even if the federal government have made those promises, ASU doesn't seem, to trust the government, going by previous agreements that have been had. In fact, the renegotiation committee that was set up had several agreements, and which is why they are on the current strike that they are in right now as regards the implementation of those agreements. So there's an issue of trust there. So if ASU should go back to the classrooms now, what's the guarantee that the federal government will do as they have promised?
There's no guarantee. And going by their antecedent, that the federal government's antecedent, they failed so many agreements, they failed to practicalize or execute so many agreements in the past. So I think ASU is ready for a showdown, which they have already gone far into. And I'm only worried about my concern is our children that are involved. Otherwise, I would have said, well, let the war begin or let the war continue. But the federal government should be serious, honestly. I mean, it doesn't speak well of them that at the twilight of this government's, at the twilight of this government, they want to leave a big mess for the incoming government. But as you well know, at this level, the government is just a lame duck. And it will be too bad if this is the legacy that the Buhari government wants to leave for the next government, or even for himself. I mean, to not speak well of him that ASU will be on strike for almost a year at the end of his government. I remember that ASU was on strike again in 2020. So I don't know who is saying the truth between the two of them, whether it's ASU or the federal government, but I think it shouldn't be too difficult for us to find out. I mean, maybe it's one of the assignments that you can dig into, or we journalists should dig into. It shouldn't be, what is the federal government offering? Let us see it. Let us see it. What is ASU saying? We already know what ASU is saying. Let us see what the federal government has to offer.
All right, Haja, let us move on to other stories. Now, let's take a look at some of the stories on the Punch newspaper for today. The Punch newspaper has a lead story that says 19.76 trillion budget proposal, 12 trillion naira deficit worries federal government, debt may hit 54 trillion. Then we have riders that say revenue shortfalls to hamper capital projects funding. Federal government says insecurity threatens FDIs. Nigeria economy shrinks by 63 billion naira, 28 sectors struggle. Government decries petrol subsidy. Airlines cut workforce over aviation crisis. Families groan as kerosene price rises by 99%. Also, we have a story here. We have a pictorial on the Punch newspaper that has a caption, explosion near RCCG camp injures 2 razors trucks. Beneath that, police plan fresh screening for protesting constables. Man arrested for stealing 50-year-old child in Lagos. Generator fumes allegedly kills Enugu groom wedding guest. Also, just above the masthead, we have 6 of 10 doctors leaving Nigeria. This is coming from the Association of Resident Doctors. Wike vows to name candidates planning looting. Work for Atiku's victory, Shakara urges supporters. And then just beneath that, court stops Kyari's US extradition. Federal government reviews judgment. These are the major stories on the Punch newspaper.
All right, so let's take a look at The Nation, on The Nation newspaper. The lead story says, PDP crisis setback for Atiku, Wike reconciliation. Atiku's men rally party organs for chairman Ayu. Something will happen soon, says Rivers governor. And then you'll also find ASU declares total indefinite strike. That's a story we dealt with. World Bank excludes Nigeria from $315 million food security cash. Court declines government's request to extradite Abba Kyari to the U.S. I am here for higher calling, says Tinubu. Gas-powered buses for use on Marina Aja-Ekpe route. You also have votes for capital projects unlikely in budget 2023, says Finance Minister.
All right, Hajia, I think let's take a look at the stories. Hajia? All right, let's take a look at the lead story on the Punch. 12 trillion deficit worries federal government. Debt may hit 54 trillion. It appears that the debt profile of the country just keeps going up, and a lot of people and experts feel that nothing tangible is being done to stem this rise. What do you think?
You mean the rise in our debt?
Yes, in the debt profile.
Debt profile. Well, I don't think the government is interested in doing anything about it. I mean, what do you mean by nothing is being done? The very people who should do something are the ones doing the borrowing. So, which is so sad because towards the end of Obasanjo's regime in 2006, 2007, when we had debt relief and were jubilating that for once, we're not going to owe, not just for ourselves, but for our children. Subsequent governments had tried to borrow a bit here and there, but this government has made borrowing an act. I mean, it's as if nothing can be done without borrowing. Even little things that we should be able to do for ourselves are not being done without borrowing. And the very people, they are the ones in government who are borrowing. They are also the ones that can do something about it. The only set of Nigerians that can stop them from borrowing is the National Assembly. But you know, the government is incapable to the National Assembly. The National Assembly is not truly independent. So,
all right.
So we wait and see when they leave office, and then that's when we'll know the truth. Right now, I think that should be our major problem now. Instead of all this election, wicked, this, that, our main problem should be we should be able to tell this government to stop, because this debt is not just for them. It's not for this generation. Generation after us will continue to pay this debt. Let's borrow for the future.
Each time the government says it needs to borrow, it comes up with things are tough, and of course the economic situation is bad everywhere. But some persons have said that the cost of governance in Nigeria is partly responsible for where we are as a country. I would like you to speak to that. And also, do you think that the implementation of the Orosaya report will help in any way? Hello,
Hello?
Hajia.
Yeah, so I got to a certain level, and let me speak on the, you mentioned Orosaye report. What did you say?
I said that each time the government wants to justify the borrowing, it talks about the fact that the general economy across the world is bad and it's not just Nigeria and things are tough. But then a lot of people have said that the cost of governance is partly responsible for Nigeria's problem and that not a lot is being done to tackle that or reduce it. So I'd like you to speak to
Yeah,
that.
yes, I am interested in this issue of cost of governance in Nigeria, because that's, to me, where our problem is. I remember that the Buhari government promised to reduce the cost of government and even mentioned the idea of presidential fleet, reducing it, but we haven't had or seen much of that. Each government official in Nigeria, or let's say minister, let's be practical about it. There's no minister that does not go about with at least, let's be modest, at least 6 or 7 cars. All these cars are fueled. There are staff attached to them. There are governors in this country that have up to 200 aides. I'm talking at the state level, at sub-national level, and at the federal government level, you cannot even quantify it. At the federal government level, there's so much waste. So cost of governance is our major problem. If Nigeria wants to, we know that there's a global recession, there's a problem, inflation is a global thing now. But while other countries are doing something practical to nip the problem in the bud, such as reducing governance and even cost of governance and even palliatives for the citizens. We do not see our own palliatives. I don't know whether you have seen your own. I have not seen anything. And we keep even increasing the number of MDAs. I know at the last count, there must have been at least almost 10 agencies have been created in the last 7 years. So before you go back to Orosaye report, if you are sincere, if the government is sincere about reducing cost of governance, it's not just about the civil service setup, as bad as that too is. It's not just about MDAs, as bad as that too is. They have to first show good faith in reducing cost of governance right from the presidency to from the executive generally, both at the presidency and at the state level, down to even the local government level. So if we see today that all these executive jets have been sold off, maybe we'll keep only 1 or 2. We'll be happy. We'll know that the government is serious. And all the aides of the president, who are in hundreds, most have reduced the number. We'll be happy. And even you and I will be ready to do something, because this thing requires sacrifice on all fronts. So, but I have not seen that sincerity on their part. So while I agree that there are too many MDAs, and that's where the Orosaye report comes in, to reduce it, to match some, to reduce and probably scrap some of them, I agree that it's good. But you know what that will do to us again? It will create more unemployment. It will surely create more unemployment for our people, because right now, what's the percentage of civil servants?
All right.
Perhaps maybe about 10%. And this 10%, you know the number of dependents that they have.
All right.
So when you reduce the number of MDAs and you reduce the number of staff, and you put some more people into you throw more people into the unemployment market, you also have social crisis.
All right, Adja. So let's quickly look at the Guardian newspaper to see what they have there on the front page, as well as the This Day newspaper. Now, the Guardian leads with the 2023 FG to borrow 11 trillion naira, spend 3.36 trillion naira on subsidy. Nigeria to spend 19.76 trillion naira next year as deficit. jumps by 54%. Government may not fund capital projects in 2023, says Finance Minister. Petrol subsidy to remain till mid-2023. We also have Ayu Wike continual war of words amid reconciliation talks. Bandits force Niger magistrate courts to relocate. And then you have beneath the pictorial, Obi Dati Media Office tackles Tinubu's group for comparing Peter Obi with Asiwaju. And then you have Obore Vori appreciates God citizens on returning as Delta PDP governor candidate. And then you also have court dismisses suit for Abba Kyari's extradition. ASU extends strike indefinitely.
All right, let's quickly take a look at this day. This day has a late story that says, are you saying this? PDP not built on any individual. No person can destabilize it. 2023 poll, a referendum on APC, says Atiku boasts he's been tried, tested, receives Shekarau into party. Wike, this is coming from Wike, something will happen in PDP soon. And then we have another writer here. Ex-Kanu governor writes INEC on new status to withdraw Senate ticket. And then beneath that, we'll have a pictorial of the reception when Shekarau was received into the party yesterday in Kanu. Also above that, we have a statement from Atiku. I will ensure NNPCL is fully privatized, run on NLNG model. Also, just right above that, State Varsity Pro-Chancellors descend on ASU over Oshodeke's comment. Then just above the masthead, INEC, politicians see elections as war. These are the major stories on this day for today.
All right, so I understand that we've lost Hajia to conclude on this newspaper review. But I mean, of interest to me is the this proposal, this budget proposal that we are now talking about. Time and again, government have said, well, if we don't borrow, how do we invest in capital projects? How do we do other things, you know, and all that? And I asked the question that all that we have borrowed over the years, shouldn't we be seeing
the dividends of what we have borrowed?
Yeah, the dividends of what we've been borrowing, especially since it has been argued that all the borrowings were invested, you know, into projects and all of that. By now, we should be generating revenue, you know, from some of those. And now it's even more worrisome when you look at the fact that the budget proposal has a deficit of 11 trillion naira, and the finance minister is saying that government may not fund capital projects in 2023. So that's, you know, that's even making it much more worrisome.
You know, that is why lots of experts have continued to say that if you don't cut cost of governance, that we'll continue to be on this track, because it's important to cut the cost of governance, and by a huge margin. I mean, no minister needs to move around with how many cars, because those cars need to be filled all the time. And then all the aids, there's no need for all of those aids. Like Hajia mentioned that there's a particular executive that has over 200 aids. To do what exactly? I mean, if those aids were working, Nigeria shouldn't be where they are.
We've not even talked about conferences abroad, you know, and the huge number of people that will be enlisted to embark on those conferences, things that should ordinarily, even things that ordinarily could happen here, right on our soil.
These days, COVID-19 has brought the innovation of Zoom. So, I mean, some people can take via Zoom and save Nigeria the cost.
Exactly. And if you now think about, you know, the skyrocketing prices of cost of tickets now to fly out of the country and all of that, it even makes it even more worse. So let's just let's give Hajia. We understand that she's back now, so let's get her concluding thoughts on some of these stories. So Hajia, still on the budget proposal, maybe you should give your final words. Specifically, if you may, talk about, you know, the issue of the fact that there have been several arguments put forward that no country grows without borrowing. So borrowing is not necessarily a bad thing, right? So Nigeria as well is not excluded from this. So how about the issue of the dividends and the things that we should be reaping from what we have borrowed by now?
Well, borrowing is almost a global thing. I agree with that. But what you do with borrowing, as you have observed too, is what matters. And our people have always said that they are borrowing for capital projects. If you borrow for capital projects, we will see it, it will be visible. And for example, the railway before bandits cut short our joy. So we know the government borrowed to build the railway, and we saw it and we applauded it. But some of the borrowings we are seeing today is either frittered away, or the capital projects are overpriced, such that the borrowing will, in the end, will end up, the capital project will either not be executed properly or not executed at all. So that means something is wrong somewhere from the time of borrowing to the time of execution of whatever they want to use it for. So if only the government can cut down on borrowing and do an assessment, even do a self-assessment of what we have borrowed and what we have used it for, and then we can see it again. In the last few years, I haven't seen any improvement in where I live and where I work. So I want to see this, where this money is going into. I understand that Niger Bridge is almost completed. That's a good one. That's what we want to hear about every part of the country, and not borrowing, then someone somewhere will loot it, or loot the Abacha loot as well.
All right. All right. So unfortunately, because of time, we have to end the discussion on the newspaper headlines. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak, and we appreciate it. We look forward to having you again.
All right. Thank you very much. We pray network will better.
Yes. All right. Our guest reviewer has been Hajia Zainab Okinu, the board chair, Blueprint newspaper, talking to us about some of the stories on the front pages of our newspapers. And that's how much we can take on the newspaper review segment. We'll take a short breather, and then when we return, we'll take a look at the headlines again and also other issues on the program. Please stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that look at the
not necessarily tribal or regional.
I have said that